Okay, great. Okay, good afternoon. Let's start today's section. As usual, I'm going to share the screen on. Oh, shoot. Okay, let's talk about schedule first. All right. So I think I have a schedule plan to June. Okay. Today we are going to, last week we talked about Chinese legalism from the book of Han Feizi, Chinese legalism. And since it's a lot, so next week we will continue on the Chinese legalism. And for those who haven't joined on last week, and you also welcome to join for next week. Even it's the part 2, but I think it's I will structure it separate. So I will have a brief overview on Chinese legalism, and then next week our focus will be more on reading. 2 major reading we are going to do. One is Zhuangzi's 天下. The 天道, okay, which is the Tao of the heaven, which is kind of criticize other school, including legalism. And then another thing we are going to read is Han Feizi's writing on book 49, which is 5 termites. Personally, I think that's a very good writing for many different reasons. So I will focus on that too, and I probably will include another reading in the Han Feizi's writing. I think Han Feizi has a good writing on the essay during that time. So that's next week. And this week, today we talk about Confucianist Metaphysics. Okay. And then going on, we will have Pin continue on the Zhuangzi reading, the equality of things. And then in May, we will have SK continue on the reading of the Hinduism, the seer, and the sin. Part 2, we're going to finish that one. And then we move on. Okay, eventually in the mid of May, we will go to the Han Dynasty. And then we're going on for the Neo-Taoism, and then move on to the later time of the China. And so that's the schedule we have. And then let's start for today. We are going to talk about the Confucianist metaphysics. I think before we start, Nova mentioned about she is interested in the metaphysics, and same as me. So before we start, let's talk about what do we mean metaphysics. Anybody want to volunteer, want to talk about your understanding of metaphysics? Because whenever we talk about metaphysics, I think people have something different in your mind. Is anybody want to talk about what is metaphysics briefly? Okay. We have James and Hugh. Okay, James, please.
Yeah, it's a category that any category that's sort of like it's a thinking aid, something that doesn't necessarily resolve to an object in the physical world, but or a category that affects objects in the physical world, but something that helps with the understanding how thought processes occur. And I think in this example, he's probably talking about how things are related to each other rather than how and establishing certain kinds of principles that like the best way of being something as opposed to what something is. So in other words, rather than determination, he's talking about how to turn a thing into a value. That sort of.
All right, thank you, James. Yeah, thank you, James. Yeah, Hugh, please.
Yes, I would say that the metaphysics has to do with the way the cosmos relates to our physical reality.
Okay, great. Yeah. So let's see. I think at least for Hume and James, we have seen some different idea of metaphysics, right? James seems focus on like non-physical world, and Hume will talk about cosmology. So and then we will see how different for that's the only my I collect what I know in the Western world when people talk about metaphysics. First, in today's text from Feng Youlan, one thing interested me is when he talk about Confucianist metaphysics, he picks two books, right? One is the book of change, which is I Ching. He considered that one as metaphysics. And then he picked one of the four books called the Doctrine of the Mean, and which is a teaching about the moral teaching. And Feng Youlan also considered this book is about metaphysics. Okay, so I think that's the interesting, and we are going to go through, and probably we have a better understanding on the ancient China and what the meaning of metaphysics. But again, metaphysics is a totally Western term, and at that time, there's no equivalent word about metaphysics during that time. Even today, if you ask people major in philosophy in Chinese or in Asian, they will talk about metaphysics as 形而上学. Okay, so this translation is by Japanese during I think in the 18th century. Japanese sent a lot of scholars to Europe to study Western culture, and then they decide to translate metaphysics as 形而上学. And then I don't know how other countries like Korean or Vietnam, and how do they translate metaphysics, but I know in China, or the Chinese will translate 形而上学 as the metaphysics as 形而上学. If you do it word by word, that means above abstracting the form or shape, very similar to what James talked about, the non-physical world. So that's today's world. Okay. So if you look at the Western, study the Western philosophy, I just pick a few people like Kant. When Kant talk about metaphysics of morals, he talk about categorical imperatives. Okay. So why he called the metaphysics of morals? Okay. And he used the word metaphysics. Okay, so that's one thing. Okay, when Kant talk about this, and in general, when we talk about the metaphysics in the Western world, usually we deal with three subjects: existence of God, immortality of soul, and the free will. That's the three subjects, so-called the perennial questions. Okay, that's also included in metaphysics. But in Chinese philosophy, there's nothing about the existence of God, nothing about the immortality of soul, nothing about the free will. So you will see that's the big difference. And when you read Bertrand Russell, okay, when Bertrand Russell talk about metaphysics, he criticized all the metaphysicians. Okay, his metaphysics, when he talk about metaphysics, he talk about the logical atomism. How do we understand? How does this world structured? So that's Bertrand Russell. So you can see everyone have a different, they probably have the similar definition, but when they talk about metaphysics, the content is very different. So I pick up from Wikipedia, the definition of metaphysics. Okay, I'm going to read this. Hold on, let me use this page a bit. Just 1 minute. Let me move to, that'll be clear. Okay, in Wikipedia, Okay. Metaphysics is defined as a branch of philosophy that study the fundamental nature of reality, the first principle of being, identity and the change, space and the time, causality, necessity, and the possibility. So sounds very Aristotelian definition, at least to me. So that's just for the reference about metaphysics we have today. So that's the general idea of metaphysics. So from now on, we are going to go through the today's reading, Feng Youran's idea of Confucianism metaphysics. And later in a few weeks, when we talk about Taoism, the neo Taoism, then we will start to talk about Taoism, Taoist definition of metaphysics. So before we go to the text, is there any question or any comment?
Yes, Jason, I would like to ask a question.
Okay, please. Thank you.
Yes, when you mentioned 形而上学, right? That's the Japanese translation of metaphysics, and you mentioned that they adopted it after visiting the West, primarily Europe, in the 18th century, or is it the 19th century that you're referring to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because in the 18th century, Japan was still.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Rather, you know, they had the what they call the closed door policy. So it was only after the Meiji Restoration, Meiji Ishin, that they started to go out after the Iwakura mission. That's after 1868, mostly in 1870s and 1880s, that they sent many students out to Europe and also to the United States to learn about the rest of the world. So I think it's the 19th century that you're referring to, isn't it?
Yeah, you are right. Sorry, you know, I made a mistake.
Okay. Yeah.
In my mind, I'm thinking about Meiji, and then I think about 1860 something, and then I just.
I understand. I was just a little confused because in the 18th century they did have access to the Western world in terms of knowledge through the Dutch settlement in Nagasaki in Dejima, and they call it Ranhaku, Lanxue. That was like the 18th and 17th centuries. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yes, and then in today's Chinese world, a lot of Western translation is coming from Japanese translation. For example, physics, okay, metaphysics, and even philosophy, 哲学 is Japanese translation. So there's many translation. Chinese just borrow from Japan, who translate from Europe or Western world. Any other question or any comment? Okay, so I'm going to start.
Daniel Madeline.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Daniel, please.
Yeah. Hi. I'm just wondering, like, would you say like metaphysics and let's say science and evidence-based are two different magisteria that overlap or don't overlap, and how do they overlap? Yeah.
Excuse me. Can you repeat your question?
If you, in your definition of metaphysics, which I like, does that overlap, or is it two different worlds or magisteria between science and metaphysics? Do they overlap, and how do they relate, metaphysics to science or evidence-based ideas?
Well, my answer will be very personal. That I don't see they have any general general definition. To me, okay, myself, I will see metaphysics is separate, no overlap from the physical world or in science, but the method, the logic behind will be used in the physical world. Put another way, in the Christian tradition or Western tradition, we have this world and the other world, right? We have the heaven, we have a secular world, but they are different. But in my understanding, they all use the same metaphysics, which is, for example, 2 + 2 = 4. It's going to work in this world and the other world. There's no square circle, okay, which is the same in this world and the other world. Even in the other world, people can fly. You may have an unicorn, you may have a different animal, doesn't follow the physical rule, but the metaphysical rule should be followed in both this world and the other world. That's just my understanding. Okay, but of course, I believe if you ask the college professor, ask different people, ask any friend in your meetup group, they will tell you the different things. So I'm not going to say I'm right, he's wrong, but I'm just saying that's my opinion. Yeah, thank you. Who is next one? Pin, who is the next one? For some reason, I cannot see that.
Madeline, and then CK, and then Hugh.
Okay, thank you. Hugh already, right? And Madeline and CK. Madeline, please.
Okay, I would add to the definition of metaphysics, which I also liked, as being basically all the cool, interesting stuff in life. I would add language, specifically how we talk about these things. If we're just thinking about English, it seems almost like a filigree as a thought, sort of unnecessary ornamentation of metaphysics. But now that I've been participating in this meetup group and the Tao Te Ching meetup group, I can see how differently the language operates in a way, like how a word can contain different connotations, and that the type of phrasing with those words that have different connotations can open up whole new worlds of things. And so I would add language to all of that.
Thank you, Madeline. I think Wittgenstein will agree with you, because when he talk about the theological problem is the grammatic problem. Okay, so thank you, Madeline. And who's the next one? CK?
CK, and then Hugh. Yeah.
Okay, CK and Hugh. Yeah.
Yes, hi. I think if we go back to the original idea of metaphysics, it originated from Aristotle, I believe. Yeah. He classified many branches of knowledge. I think he had astronomy and mathematics, maybe one branch of that mathematics called geometry, and astrology, all kinds of stuff, and then physics. And after that, he had this category called metaphysics, where he grouped everything that couldn't be classified. It's like a miscellaneous box where everything was thrown in there that couldn't be classified under the previous categories. I don't know if this understanding of metaphysics in its original form is correct. So I appreciate anybody to talk more about this.
Yeah, thank you, CK. So we will have Hugh, right? So I think I will stop after Hugh, because we have to move on. And
Yeah.
To the end, we are going to have a further discuss after we see what Feng is writing, and we probably have a different definition, okay, about metaphysics. Hugh, you have anything to say?
Yeah. Sorry to be the second time, but it's interesting what Madeline says, because I was thinking, are the languages the words that we use in our various languages, are they reflective of how we see the cosmos and how it relates to, our physical interaction and how we describe them? That is just my thought and question, if that may be so.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. Let's move on. Okay, first, two writing we are going to deal today. One is the Book of Changes, and then another one is the Doctrine of the Mean. Okay, so let's deal with Book of Changes. So we talk about Book of Changes a few weeks ago, and even long time ago, last year, we talked about so-called I Ching, which is probably one of the oldest book in not only in China, probably in the world. Okay. So is anyone want to have a quick talk about I Ching, or somebody have no idea what I Ching is or what the book of changes? I can have or anyone can have a 5 minutes, 2 minutes review. What's the book of changes? Otherwise, I will assume everybody know what the book is. Of course, nobody knows all the details, but at least you have an idea what kind of book it is.
I need
I
help.
see three. I see
need
three
help.
hands up. Oh, okay.
Okay, go ahead.
No, I think maybe the hands up mean that they would like an intro to I Ching.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
well,
That's correct.
oh, sorry. I was just going to. Oh, I thought you would raise your hand if you wanted to say.
Okay, CK, please. CK, you want to talk about what is I Ching?
Did I raise my hand?
Yes, I see your hands up.
Oh, I did. Oh, okay. Well, okay. All right. Well, I think the I Ching was present even during, apparently since the Shang dynasty, and it was recorded by Confucius when he was tabulating some of the ancient texts. It's a book whereby there are lots of symbols showing in hexagrams or all kinds of stuff, that symbols that that purport to explain, certain like those, certain scenarios, and it depends on how you interpret them. It seems to be truly metaphysical. So I know nothing about it other than that's how well it looks. Yep.
Yeah, okay, thank you, CK. So let me quickly go some terminology. Okay, so basics, we have this one, that each line we call yao, and then we have the yin and the yang. For example, you see the broken line. Okay, that's yin. If a solid line, it's yang. So if we put three together, we call it the trigram. So we will have 8 different trigrams. And for these 8 different trigrams represent the different things in the natural world, like earth, mountain, water, wind, thunder, fire, lake, and heaven. So if you put these 8, make a combination, right? So you put they together, right? They have 8. They have the one trigram and another trigram together. 8 times 8, we have the 64. Then we call it the hexagram because they have the six lines. So the total combination will be the 64 hexagram. So the original book of changes is for divination. You can predict something is good to do or not good to do. So you use different methods to do the combination for the 6 yin and the yang. So the ancient people that compile all this together, and then they have the explanation on each of the hexagram. So the total is 64. But for each hexagram, right, they have the 6 lines. For each line, they have their own interpretation. Something like the heaven is great. Okay, let's move. Something I just use.
Jump in the lake, no regret.
Yeah, no regret. Okay, so all these kind of message on there. So today we are going to talk about is a little different than the original book of change. So I'm going to move here, so-called the 10 winds. We don't know if it's true or not true, but basically we consider this 10 winds is written by Confucius. Okay, after when in the old age of Confucius started to be interested in the book of change, and he started to put the commentary on this ancient divination book, and he gave this book some moral sense, or you want to call it metaphysics of moral on this book. So that's how this book, the Divination book, become a Confucian textbook, because they have the 10 winds of Confucius commentary. But of course, it could not be all by Confucius. Probably some of by his student continue to comment on that. So that's we are going to talk about is the 10 winds of the Book of Changes, not the divination part of this book. So I have a huge hands up. You have a question?
No, yeah, I think you said what I was going to say. I just was saying that, you know, it was the Book of Changes and they use symbols to represent, you know, what would be the best path to take and when to take it, sort of using these symbols and things like that.
Okay, thank you. So 10 winds. Okay, let me go through the 10 winds. I think from your lines writing include this one, but not systematic. So I just put all them together. So so-called 10 winds. Okay. So first is 团转. Okay. Is it 团? Okay. I think it means the judgment. The original word, this word means the snot of pig, and pronounced 团 or 团. So I means 断 or judgment. So so they have the judgment. Put it this way. Okay, before that, 易经 Book of Change, traditional have 2 parts. Okay, total have 64, but the first 30 is the first book, and then from 31 to 64 are the second book. So the first 30 is deal with the nature world. And the second part from 31 to 64 is deal with the human world. So in Western philosophy, or I use Kant, Immanuel Kant's definition, from 1 to 30 is the critique of pure reason. Okay, talk about the nature world, nature rule. And from 31 to 64 is Kant's second critique of practical reason. How do we behave, deal with the human world? So if we put this way, okay, that will be the first book and the second book. Remember, it's not 32 and the 32, it's 30 and the 34. Okay, so the Tuan, we have 2 books. One is the for deal with the first 30s, and the second part is deal with the last 34, and which is called the judgment. That means give the very similar to so-called the critique. You are going to tell this good or this not bad. What's the meaning of that? That's the judgment. And then number 3 was so-called the xiang, right? Xiang, you talk about the image. You look at the image, and then xiang means elephant. Okay, in Chinese it means elephant. And since in the ancient time, China doesn't have an elephant. You have to travel to south, to like Thailand, that area to see the elephant. So I believe during that time, some people, adventurous people, probably see the elephant, but most people don't see it. But when you see the elephant, I think that's human nature. When you see the elephant, you were amazed by the size, by the shape. So when you come back, you will start to describe. Lots of the elephant look like this. So I think the image of elephant has been in most people's mind, but most people never see it. So for this reason, Chinese use elephant or xiang as an image. So here we talk about xiang zhuan. Okay, so Confucius also write the xiang zhuan, talk about the image of the hexagram. Okay, each one. And he's not only right, he's not only writes the 64 for 64 different hexagrams. He also go inside every single yao, every line to describe everyone. So that means each hexagram, they have the 7 lines of Confucius commentary, overall image, okay, the image of that. So that comes with like 4 different winds, 4 winds. Then continue, it can also have the so-called commentary, 系词, right? 系词, okay, which is appended phrase. I think it's a general comment. Then also for the first part and the second part. Then we have 文言, so-called 文言, which is only deal with heaven and earth. So that's a two-part, heaven part and the earth part. Then more important is so-called sequence of a hexagram, because this 64 is line up from the first one to the last one, number 1 to number 6, and how does it line up? They have the reason. Confucius write a comment on that. Then you have the miscellaneous writing. They have the so-called explanation on each trigram. Okay, so I think that's the comment for the 10 winds. So we are not going to read all of this comment, but some of them included in the Feng Youlan's book. I'm going to go through that. So first, let's read the 系词, okay, the commentary, okay, on the very, I think that's on the very beginning, okay. What it said, it described, I think that describes 3 important concepts, which is what is Yi, so-called the book of change, Yi Jing, what's the meaning of Yi, and the Qian, okay, which is heaven, and the Kun, which is earth. You can see the hexagram here. Okay. Let me enlarge this one a little. Okay, so let's start it on Qian and the Kun, the secret of the Yi. Okay. Yi is established when Qian and the Kun are orderly displayed. Yi could be hidden when Qian and the Kun are disordered. When Yi is hidden, Qian and the Kun will almost cease to act. So basically, that's the opening of the sheets. You talk about the relationship between Qian and the Kun, okay, and Yi. Okay. So let me give some quick explanation of these 3 words. Yi, in most translation, call it changes, but they have the 3 meanings. First is change. Second is non-change, okay? And the third is easy or simple, okay? So that's the meaning on this word. So a lot of people may ask, how come you have the word of which meaning is change and also means not change, right? The situation is the book of change is deal with the word, which is change, but underlying principle is unchanged. Okay, so is talking about this change and unchanged part. And if you understand the principle, the unchanging principle, which will make everything easy, simple. So that's how Yi has the 3 meanings. And the Qian and the Kun also important in this concept, because the Chinese like to talk about heaven and the earth. So Qian means heaven. So if you see the hexagram, you will see 6 lines are all yang, which is so-called male, okay? And the earth has 6 lines of all female, or broken lines, or yin. So that's the 3 things we are going to deal in the book of change. So that's the opening talk about the Yi and the Qian and the Kun. And I'm going to continue on the writing, and here you try to define the metaphysics, which is Xing Er Sang. So after that, the book of change writing is hence forming and abstracting, okay, is what we call Dao. Forming and concretizing is what we call material. Transforming and tailoring is what we change. change. Carried out and operating is what we call movement. Applying and placing on all people is what we call comprehensive business. So that's why I look through Feng Youlan's translation and I make a few changes. And then of course, I have no way to claim this translation is the best or is scholastic or whatever. That's just based on my understanding in the Chinese word and the English word. So I'm welcome to anyone have different opinion or different understanding of the, doesn't matter you know Chinese word or not Chinese word. And I'm welcome to anyone to tell me, you know, how do you think about this one, or either you agree or disagree on this translation, because the word is very vague, very abstract. So that's I try my best to translate this text. So Daniel, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm rather naive. I'm trying to understand what the symbols, what purpose the symbols serve. Is it a mnemonic device? Is it a way of categorizing? How does the symbol relate to this concept of change and unchange? I don't get it. So maybe.
Okay. Just give you a little bit the history background. Okay, so this one is used to, you think about like, let's imagine in the ancient time, if you want to know, let's say I'm going to send the military to another country. I'm not sure, I'm the king, and I'm not sure is that a good thing to do or not good thing to do. So that's something I have to decide. So I have the people, so-called expert, to tell me. So he will use the way, let's say, let's use a coin, right? A head and tail, right? Head is in, is yang, tail is in. So I flip 6 times, okay? So I got 6 lines, okay? So then I will see this one, I give a name. And then they'll say, okay, let's go. Okay, let's go fight my neighboring country. And then turn out I won, okay? So I keep the record on that. So for 100 years, we have the different combination and different result. And the people start to record this one is, if you go to yin, yang, yang, yin, okay, that means this. If you go this combination, it means the other one. So they become compiled, become a book of divination, okay? So later on in Confucius, okay, you look at the divination, okay, then they start to give meaning of the moral lesson or try to explain why it's going here. I think that's the book coming from. So at the original, probably just pure for predict the future or try to tell you what to do, okay, when you face this situation. So that's my explanation. And then
So isn't it random? I mean, you just, you know, how you throw, it's random, it's luck. It's like throwing dice. And
it's luck. Okay, but of course, just like any ancient way to predict things, and it's very primary, right? You can imagine probably in this world, not only in China, every country in the ancient time, it's not surprised people will do something like this. And the difference is Chinese probably keep record on this one, and they try to systemize and give the meaning on that. So originally, probably just the definition book, today we talk about astrology, okay? But later on, the Confucius scholar start to give the meaning on each one, and later on become some moral lesson on that. So that's the come out with this one, and probably that makes sense for today to study. Of course, that's just my opinion. I heard the people talk about Confucius or Confucian scholar screw up the whole book. They think this book have deep mystical meaning, and then Confucian scholar screw up it, put the moral meaning on that, and destroy the mystical meaning on that. So that's a different opinion. But since this one is philosophy group, so I think I will promote this idea. So, we have a few hands up. Let's go through Dominic, Hume, and James. Dominic, please.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for hosting. I think you almost said there already. I'm just wanted to ask, so could we say that this system of the system that we just described there, yeah, with the lines, the hexagons, and so on, that it is somewhat akin to or somewhat comparable to doing numerology or astrology, just to get a broad way of comparing it to something. That means if someone had an issue, then they would question the system as in applying a given issue and applying it into the system, and then seeing what the given system, for example, the one with the hexagons and its symbolism, what results come out of it, and as in some kind of higher sacred geometry or form as astrology as a comparison. Would that be a good comparison to get a first grasp on that?
Well, I think your answer would be, my answer would be yes. And then it really depends on how you're going to explain it. And I know today still have the people, okay, claim, well, they some so-called expert, they will use I Ching Book of Change to tell, okay, what you need to do. Should you marry this girl? And this marriage is good. When will you have a kids? When will you become grandfather? So all these kind of still have the people very, very serious on it, okay, on the prediction side, okay. But that's a difference, and I think I probably were not talking too much on this, because today we really want to deal with Confucianist metaphysics. So we have a lot of hands up. So I will let Pin go first, and then we have a CK and Hughes. Okay, Pin, please.
Thank you, Jason. So I actually had to step away for a couple of minutes. So if it's something that you already covered or anyone already covered, please feel free to just stop me. So I heard some questions about the hexagrams itself. And Daniel had a question whether it's just in mnemonics. It's actually a lot more than just mnemonics. The symbols themselves have many layers of meaning. So one can think of the solid line as representing positive, and the broken line as representing negative. But this is not a judgmental positive or negative. They're just kind of like, if you want, in physics, there are the positive charges and negative charges. It's just what it represents. It's not like negative is bad somehow, or positive is good. And also and then when you arrange these lines, right, the arrangement itself has meaning. The lowest lines represent kind of a phase in a situation. The lowest line could represent maybe when you're in the beginning phase of some kind of adventure or situation. And then the position itself has meaning. And then what symbol falls in which position has meaning also. So sometimes you have the positive symbol in a certain situation, that's a mismatch. And that could mean that it's not kind of an ominous situation that you're in, because the positive one is in a situation where it should have been negative, as an example. So it has many, many layers of meaning, and the whole book is about interpreting the meanings represented by these symbols as situations that you encounter in life. And the divination was, a lot of it was actually, let's say you're someone, you face a dilemma, and you have several options that you want to consider, and the divination tells you which option is likely the better one. So it's not a pure like fortune telling. It's about when you face choices, supposed to help you think about and decide which one might be the better choice. Okay, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pin. Yeah, that's yeah. And then I heard one person tell me that's a good mental exercise. Okay, so when you face some problem, dilemma. You use the book of change. I'm totally talking about mystical part. So you just have the different combination, and the message will tell you something. And it's not, you are not going to strictly just follow it, but that's for you, the mental exercise. Through this, think about the situation, give you a guideline. So that's another way to look at this one. So I think we will stop talking about the too much on the I Ching itself. Now we are going to talk about commentary. So we have the CK and the Hugh, and then I'm going to move on. CK, please.
Yes, sorry, I still have questions on the word E. You mentioned 3 definitions: change, unchange, and ease.
Yeah.
I don't understand why E is unchanged. That's my first question.
Okay.
And then my second question is could there be a 4th dimension to it? Because E could also means exchange.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But I don't see, at least I don't see I Ching's E has the meaning of exchange like this. Okay, but I think traditional definition in E, book of change, okay, have 3 meaning. One is change. I think that's easy to understand. If you look at the hexagram, each one is different, but they are looking for the guideline which unchanged, right? They have the unchanging rule, unchanging principle behind it. On the surface, you see everything is changing. Look at, we can use it, algebra as an example. Let's give you a series of number, right? 9, 18, 27, 36. Okay, let's use 4 number, 9, 18, 27, 36. For the people doesn't know algebra, will say, oh, that's a change, number keep changing. But if you know the rule, right, which is the product of 9, so you see the unchanging rule. So that's why E has the meaning of changing and unchanging. And then after you know both, you start to understand that's easy, and that's simple. So I think that's the 3 layers of understanding of this world. Hugh, please.
Yeah, so my question was, how did certain combinations come to mean certain outcomes? Was it by trial and error, or was it that, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
they were going to battle and they come up with a thing, and then they went and they succeeded. So they say, okay, this is now, these symbols mean that we will win. Then, you know, and then they did something else and they put some symbols together, and then they went and they lost, and they say, okay, these combination means that we're gonna lose. So if it comes up, this means lose, this means win. Is that a fair statement or analogy?
Well, I don't know the answer, okay, but
okay.
it really depends on what's your view on that, right? So astrology today, right? Some people say, oh, that's reason, and we just don't understand. You have to study hard. And some people say, oh, that's totally random, you know. So I don't know, no answer.
It's really a thinking process. When you think about how this actually worked, that you have this advisor. First of all, it's not something like any person can just do and get a symbol and it gives you an answer. So there's a diviner that does this a whole ceremony. And first you have to bathe yourself. You have to be a vegetarian for like a whole day. And then you go into a quiet room, cleanse your heart first, and then you do this very complicated process of dividing these straws. It's like a whole mathematical computation. And then you wind up with a certain symbol. And then actually, there are certain rules about you change the lines of the symbols that you have to see how the situation, you have to look at the situation from another perspective. So let's say the first symbol you got is this one. And then you actually have to change certain ones so that results in a different symbol. And then you have to take those into consideration too. So it's really kind of a process of first calming yourself and get yourself in a certain thoughtful mindset. And then you wind up with some random symbol, and then you have to change it so that you have to look at the situation from different perspectives. And then you come to a certain conclusion. And so all the conclusion is very interpretive. You know, a lot of it is really within the power of the diviner, right, who did this whole process and tells the client, oftentimes a king, a ruler, or someone like that, and said, well, this is a conclusion I come to, and this is what ought to be done. So it's it's a very complicated thing.
Yeah. Okay, so
thank you very much.
Okay, let's stop here. Okay, because I think we have enough about the definition part. Okay, or you want to call it the mental exercise. Yeah, that's probably another way to call it. Okay, so let's go on this one. Okay, so let's continue read, because we already deal with the Qian and the Kun, which is the heaven and the earth and the Yi, right? And I think a lot of words come out with Dao. Okay, so right now here we deal with what's different between Yi and the Dao. Okay, I think most of people are familiar with the way called Dao, right? So the writing, the text here is the interaction. Okay, one yin and one yang is Dao, is called Dao. And that which is successive from this Dao is goodness. And that which is completed by this is the nature. The nature here means the nature of man and the thing. And the Ren is benevolence, the Confucius teaching. Okay, the Ren people see it and call it the Ren, and the wise see it and call it wisdom. So here we talk about the relationship between yin, yang, and yi and the Dao, their relationship. So here is a further definition, a few words, okay? So here we call the production and the reproduction is the function of yi, which is process of change. Or we talk about the three changes. That's the production and the reproduction. So that means it keeps changing. Forming and the imaging is the function of Qian, which is heaven. The imitation and the following is the function of Kun, which is earth. So basically talk about the earth is following the heaven, and heaven is forming something, and the earth is imitating. So the exhaustive use of the number and the knowing the coming events is the function of divination. So here's talk about Yi's function. Another function is for divination. The comprehension of changes is the function of business. When you're doing things, you have comprehensive understanding the changes. And then they also recognize the unpredictable part of our daily life. So we talk about unpredictability of the change of yin and the yang is the function of the spiritual power. So that's the best I can do for the translation. And for those who read the Chinese, and of course you can, if you don't read the Chinese, that's fine. You can raise your opinion on that, you know, because the word is very difficult to change a lot of words. For example, 是 and 神, okay, how do I translate? So that's the best I can do to do it in English. So let's talk, this one is talking about yin and the yang and then yi and the Dao on this one. So let me move on, okay. So this chapter, so I draw this one. So this one we will deal with when we talk about Near Confucius in the later time. Okay, it's very famous, but the writing here in the book of changes, in the Yi there is the spring ultimate. Okay, spring ultimate is Tai Chi. Okay, Tai Chi, I think most of people familiar with, because you play Tai Chi. When you say Tai Chi, you means the kind of exercise to make you healthy. Okay, or you can fight with Tai Chi. But the original word, it means spring ultimate. So in the Book of Change, the commentary is in the Yi, there is the supreme ultimate, which is Tai Chi, which produce two forms. When you say two forms, that means yin and yang, okay? And these two forms produce four images, or you want to call it the four emblems. That's okay. So if you do the four line, the so-called the four different, some people relate this one to the four season. Some people relate this to the sun, moon, stars, and the time. Okay, 日月星辰. Okay, that's another way to look at. And then these four images produce 8 trigrams. Remember, that's 8 trigrams for the different heaven, earth, fire, water, or thunder, lake, all this kind of thing. And the 8 trigrams serve to determine the fortune and the misfortune. And from this determination, the great business is conducted. So that explains, how to use Yi, okay, and yin and the yang from nothing to Tai Chi, and to yin and the yang to 4 images, and to 8 different, you call it, phenomena, and to the 64 hexagram. So let's talk about that. This one is describe the general use of Book of Change from the Confucianist point of view. Okay, so let's move on. So anyone have any comment or any question so far? Okay, so I'm going to move on. Okay, so here is going to another part. I think this part is interesting. It's talking about the sequence of this 64. Remember, this 64 is from 1 to 30, deal with the natural world, and from 31 to 64 is dealing with the human world. So the sequence is important according to the writing. So it's not like randomly put the 64 together. That's the reason. So each one generates the other one. That's so-called 序卦 or sequence of the hexagram. So of course, we have heaven, we have earth, which is Qian and the Kun. That's number 1 and the number 2. And then I think in the previous slide, we talk about the from the Tai Chi and the generate 2 form, yin and the yang, and the 4 image and blah, blah, blah. Then Kun, Qian, the heaven is the first. Then the earth is follow it. Then number 3 called Tun. Okay, so the writing is when there were heaven and the earth, and then afterwards all things were produced. What fill up the space between heaven and the earth are those all things. Hence, Kun and Qian and the Kun are followed by Tun. That's this one. That's why Tun is number 3. And then start to explain. Number 4, Tun denotes fill up. Tun is descriptive of things on their first production. When so produced, they are sure to be in the undeveloped condition. Hence, Tun is followed by Meng. Okay, then you go to number 5. What's the Meng meaning? So let's keep going on and on and on until you go to the 30, they finish. And after 30 finish, then start to talk about the human world. Okay, start from 31, right? And this one is interesting. Also put in the Feng Youlan's book. He talked about following the existence of heaven and the earth. There is the existence of all things. Following the existence of all things, there is the distinction between male and the female. And following this distinction, there is the distinction between husband and the wife. Following this distinction, there is the distinction between father and the son. Follow this distinction, there is the distinction between emperor and the minister. Emperor and the minister is the original word, so-called 君臣, but in today we can interpret as a sovereign and the subject. Following this distinction, there is the distinction between superiority and inferiority. Following this distinction, there are social order and justice, which we talk about the excuse me, the rituals and the righteousness. So start to give if you notice the change, that's a switch from the natural world, right? The heaven and the earth to the human world, male, female, husband, wife, father, and the son, emperor, and the minister. Then go to the moral teaching, the superiority and the inferiority, and go to the ritual and the righteousness. Okay, so start to tell you how to behave. So we keep going on number 32, to give all the reason about why that's coming to the next one. Then until the 63, which you talk 寂寂, this gua, if you see this one, so-called 寂寂. So the commentary is, he that suppress others is sure to remedy the evil that exists, and therefore 小过 is succeeded by 寂寂. Okay, so 小过 is the last one. Okay, so 小过 is the previous one, 62, and the 寂寂 is 63. Then you start to explain, but the succession of events cannot come to end, and therefore 寂寂 is supposed to 未寂. Okay, and then which is the hexagram. So 未寂 is the last one. So that's why. So from the first one to the last one, they have the sequence. Of course, please don't ask me for all the detail. I just translate, and then a lot part is, I think it's hard to understand, but some expert will have a better understanding on the all 64. How do they lay out? How do they? Pin, you have a better way to talk about this? Pin, please.
I just want to add, this is, so as far as this ordering, there were, before Confucius' time, there were two other versions of Yi Jing. One is called Lianshan, the connected mountain, and another one is called Guicang, return into hiding. But the only one that survived is this one called Zhou Yi, the Zhou, like the Zhou dynasty, and supposedly was this version was written by the father of the founding king of the Zhou dynasty, and so I just want to add that little fact for
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's actually what I'm talking about is Zhou Yi, and they have the three different kind of Yi, but that's the only one left. So so far we finished the part of Book of Change. We are doing very well on the time. Thank you, everyone. And let's give 5 minutes to discuss if you have a question on about Book of Change, and then and I also ask everyone to think about it. Why this part is metaphysics, right? So, and then just keep in your mind, and later we can discuss why we talk about this, and then why Confucianists like to talk about this. Madeline, please.
Okay, three things that aren't really, excuse me, connected. Can you scroll down just a little bit so we can see the bottom of this slide?
This one?
Here we go. Yeah. Yep, just down a little bit so I can see the bottom sentence.
Is this one the number 64?
Yeah, just go down a little bit. Good. Okay, so but the succession of events, excuse me, cannot come to an end. So right here, we have a cosmology that is very, very different from the Western Christian cosmology, in which there is this big apocalyptic thing, and then Jesus comes back, and then, I don't know, everyone goes to heaven. So that's one thing, which is this is sort of tucked in there as a big metaphysical statement that's kind of assumed within this. simply by the way the order of the hexagrams is. The other thing was, you don't have to flip back to this. In the list of 10 things, the 10 wings, when you said these, it sounded like snot of the pig, but I think you probably meant snout of the pig.
Yeah, yes, not. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the snout of the pig, I thought that was actually a very interesting way of looking at judgment. Whether it's a pig or a porcupine or something like it, it's a mammal, it's an omnivore, and it's foraging around. It's looking at things, it's examining what they are, sniffing them, and discerning between them. Is this edible or not? Is this useful or not?
So you say you have three things? Is there the other thing?
Yeah, I don't know how many people have their hands up. I'm very sorry, I spaced out for a minute when you were saying what the 4 emblems were.
Yeah.
And I missed just what the list was.
Okay, thank you. So first, you talk about the Ji, okay, Wei Ji, the last one. It's thank you to pick up this this thing, because Wei Ji means not finished, but this is the finish, right? That's the last one. So the view is a cycle, cyclical world, right? So when you to the end, then you begin again. So it's very different from the, we should say, the Christian world. They have the start, they have the end, right? So I think that's the it's a cycle. Number 2, about the pig, so the tuan. Yeah, thank you for this kind of explanation. But I think it's because the pronunciation called duan or tuan or something. So it sounds like duan means cut off, so means judgment. That's just my understanding. But and about the 4 image or 4 emblems, I don't know what they mean in detail, but I think some people refer this 4 emblem or 4 image to the 4 seasons, and some people refer to 4 cosmology elements. Okay, sun, moon, star, and the time. 日月星辰. I think that's the mean. And some people refer this one to the 4 different part of body. I'm not very sure, but basics, that's the 4 images means. So any other question or comment before we move on to another text, which is Doctrine of Means?
Yes, I have a very quick question. I mean, I hope
sorry.
it's not off topic.
Yeah, go
No,
ahead.
it's fine, it's fine. No, the Tao Te Ching and the I Ching, is that the same book that we're talking about? Tao Te Ching and I Ching is the same, the Book of Changes, or is it 2 different books that we're talking
That's
about?
2 different books. Okay, so we will say Tao Te Ching in the Taoist teaching, and I Ching is very, very old book. And then I think all the Chinese philosophy probably have some source or some relation with the Book of Change, I Ching. And especially today we talk about the 10 Winds, which is a commentary from Confucius or other Confucianists. So it's a lot of flavor. It's a Confucian's flavor more than.
So we have a multiple of writers in the I Ching. We have a multiple of writers, and do we know any of them?
I believe it has multiple writers. Yeah, I believe. Okay, so
Wait, the other part of the question, do we know any of them?
oh,
well, the traditional theory is that the main part of the text was written by the founding king of the Zhou dynasty, Zhou Wenwang. And the 10 appendices were written by Confucius and his students.
Okay, so we have a lot of hands up. Okay, so let's go from CK, Kevin, and I believe it's Udina. Okay, so CK, please.
Yes, because I think the I Ching with all these hexagons, the results are vague and open to interpretation. and the diviner has the power to interpret. The diviner is often, well, either a court diviner or a mystic. What is there to prevent this diviner from, well, for want of a better word, bullshitting, you know, and just saying anything he wants, or he or she wants to? I mean, I think in Chinese history there are many instances of this. You know, you get a king who wants to find out what is going on with the heavens or with his state of his country, and he goes and consult the I Ching with a diviner, and the diviner, there's some result, and the result may not be to the king's liking, so he or she will bullshit their way out of it. Otherwise, they get executed probably. So yeah, I mean that really is my question. I mean, what is there to separate it from superstition?
I actually have a different perspective, but I agree. I mean, it's an excellent question. I actually see that at that time, it was a form of check and balance. Number one, on unlimited power of the monarch, that there's something higher. And when the diviner says, you know, this is, I basically asked the cosmos, and this answer I got. And a lot of, at least in written Chinese history, of course, it has its own biases, but a lot of the bad advice didn't come from most of it didn't come from the diviners. They came from the court eunuchs and the king's relatives, and or powerful nobilities and ministers that had their own hidden agenda. The diviner actually normally was a very well educated, learned person that was brought up to have a conscience, but of course, humans are humans. That you know, I totally agree with you. That doesn't necessarily always work. Yeah, but I actually saw it as kind of a system at that day to have a little bit of a check on the various powers that could do a lot of bad.
Yeah, CK, thank you for your question. And then your question made me think about one thing, right? So when you see the message, even the old time, even today, right? They never give you a very clear message. Don't marry this girl, right? They always say something blurred, okay? So I believe because the diviner cannot say something too clear, otherwise, you know, being executed if it's not correct. So you have to leave some room to interpretation. So it's because you didn't follow that actually means, you know, when I say girl, doesn't mean this girl, that means that. So I think that's sometimes it's vague. Probably that's the reason. Yeah. Next one is Kevin.
Thank you, Jason. From this 64, Gua is called VG. It's not a V, it's not and. Why not and? Because going to the first one, it's like a cycle, a circle. That's a beautiful thing. It's about our situation always change. So that's one point. Secondly, this slide, you can a little bit up. You see whole chapter. I can see a couple points from the Confucius, why they follow formula Confucius from this. And also that's why I call it Li, righteous, and yeah. Then also this from where's the human come from, man and woman. This first have 10 things. Before 10 things, Tian and Di. Even before a couple slides ago, it's got Wu. That's another word. We may see the sky match to heaven in the Western. Also Wu, we consider empty. Wu is nothing. Actually, Wu can generate you, which being. That's very interesting. One can you slide about 仁德戒能智则戒智? Can you slide that one? That's one idiom. That's so couple slides ago. Slide back. about, guys. That's one from one idiom. Give me something. About. 仁者见仁，智
Yeah.
者 okay, here. It's very interesting. What's the Dao? Here it says yin and yang, which is called Dao. One yin and one yang is called Dao. And the last two sentences, 仁者戒之谓之仁，智者戒之谓之智. We have a common idiom still used now. Let's receive the Dao. If it's Ren people, they say it called Ren. Another people, knowledgeable people call them wisdom. It's by the Zhi, they have the same pronunciation. Here, basically, the Zhi is knower, know, and the actual wisdom, the same pronunciation. It's very interesting, same perspective. Like we got one object. If I say it, it's one thing. If I'm Ren, called Ren, another people from another angle see it different, called wisdom. So it's very interesting. Think about like we modern days, nowadays, we have a unique answer. Yes or no. And like math, 1 + 1 has to be 2. You got a 2.1 or 4, you get something wrong. Okay, pause here.
Well, thank you. So we have Alina and Hugh. Then I'm going to move on. Okay, Alina, please. Or iPhone 20.
Yes, that's Elena, and thank you. All right, so I'd like to ask for clarification. So what comes here, like with this particular slide that's just coming up, Jason, if you just bring it down a little, the one above it, it's called
This one?
yeah, before that, one before that. Yes, this one. So what it says here, so the yi, from that comes the supreme ultimate, which is Tai Chi.
Mm-hmm.
And then other forms are produced, yin and yang, from that. So and the yi at the same time is being referred as the production and reproduction process of change. So what is that yi just how do you separate it from Dao and separate it? What is that? And Tai Chi, the supreme ultimate, is it creating force, or is it, what is that in this particular interpretation? Thank you.
Well, I don't see I have a clear answer on that. I think it's basically it talk about the Tai Chi, the ultimate, and it's it talk about the process of generation. And then I don't see I know your question, but I don't have answer. And any answer would be, you also can find a different answer. So there's no fixed answer on this one. So sorry, I have to pass your question, but your question is a wonderful question, and we probably will have a lot of time to discuss this one. So Pin, you have an answer? Okay, but just
quick, I just want to point out, so Wuji literally means no bound. So to me, I've always understood that, that's like infinity.
Okay.
And Tai Chi is the greatest bound. So it's still like infinity, but now we have content, right? Wuji, there's nothing inside. This is infinity, but there is yin and yang exist at that point. So if you will, Wuji is like before the Big Bang, and Tai Chi is like right, the first nanosecond after the Big Bang. That there's actually something in the material world now, and it's yin and yang. And then from there, you have the combinations of the yin and yang. There's 4 combinations, and those are the 4 things in the middle there. but that's really just a transitional stage. That's why it doesn't have, it's hard for Jason to explain because there isn't, it's just the combination. And then from there you have the 8. It's the next step in the binary number system. And the 8 is a significant step where the ancients have imparted meanings to them, corresponding to various phenomena in nature, like thunder, lightning rather, and mountain and water and heaven and earth. And then the next step is the 64 that's supposed to represent all different situations in life.
Yeah, thank you, Pim. Yeah, I think that's a good explanation. I think you are a scientist, so cosmologist, so you have a better explanation. Thank you. Yeah, I think
so. I think, like CK said, maybe I bullshit that a little.
No, that's great. you should propose in JPL. I think they probably will give you some award on that. So, CK, please.
Oh, yes, I'd like to sort of have an attempt at explaining Wuji and Taiji based on what Pin said. So if Wuji is infinity, in the Greek symbol infinity, Taiji could be extrapolated as infinity, the square root of infinity, which of course doesn't exist. So it's completely imaginary, but perhaps conceptually that is one way to look at what Taiji is.
Thank you, CK. Yeah. I think we will have a lot of time to later, if you join me in the later section. I think that during the Song Dynasty, the Neo-Confucian, Zhou Dunyi, he has a lot of the explanation on that. So next one will be Hume and the Medley. Hume, please.
Okay. So is it fair to say that logic has changed from that time to this time? So now that we are more scientific, right, in our modern age, are we saying that it makes this, what we are studying, more superstitious? Or are we saying that we still have that element of philosophy that we want to know if there's a connection between science and cosmology, like in a metaphysical sense, I'm talking?
Thank you, Hume. I think you asked, your question actually is one of my primary interests to study ancient Chinese philosophy. Today we talk about logic. We probably meant in our original source from Aristotelian syllogism, okay? And that's how when I say we mean in the Western world, convince people, because we so-called logic, and which means non-contradiction, or the everything have its reason. And when we say reason, a lot of time we talk about syllogism. But in China, during that time, or we can say before the Western science or logic being introduced to China, all the Asian doesn't have the syllogism. So I always have a question: how does Chinese convince people other than you use your position as an authoritative? How can I convince you? So that's one of my primary interests on that. So next week, we are going to read Han Fei. The reason I pick 5 termites, because Han Fei, if you think about like, how does Confucian teach it, right? How does Confucius teach you? He said, doing ren, doing zi, doing ritual, doing that. He didn't tell you the reason. Only thing Confucius will tell you is the ancient sage is doing this. So what's the reason? So how do you convince? What's the logic? I think next week we read 5 termites. They have Han Fei has his way to convince people, which is not attributed to ancient sage. He looked forward. So again, today's subject talk about metaphysics. If you look at this chart, you see some kind of, you can call logic, which is not syllogism, which has a trend, the principle going on. It's still very vague. I think the vague, because we say it's vague, because we don't have the right term on that in English. So I think you asked a wonderful question, and then I also interested to read another Chinese philosopher who is the classmate of Feng Youlan, because both of them are the student of Jiang Dui. Okay, and Hu Si, who is a Hu Si, he is more interested in the logic of ancient China. So I think later, probably this year, next year, if we still have a chance, I will start to introduce Hu Si's idea on the ancient Chinese logic. Yeah, a little bit too long on your answer.
Yeah,
but
yeah, but that's good that you answered that way, because I think I share the same interest that you have. And also, when you talk about Chinese medicine, the little that I know about Chinese medicine, they talk about the meridian. And then when you look at Western medicine, you know, they would tell you, oh, Western medicine just deals with the symptom, right? But in Chinese medicine, it deals with the root. Is that a fair statement?
Well, I try not to answer your question. That's most of the people practice Chinese medicine saying
Yes.
this one. But well, if you look at the Roman medicine, during the Roman Empire, right? They have a different way to deal with medicine. One is deal with the symptom. One is different with the root. Okay.
Yes.
And which one is correct? That's another thing to do. And does that mean to deal with the root is the right way? That's another question. So that we talk about this one later.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome. We have, okay, look like we are running out of time. We have too many questions on I Ching. I know when I bring up I Ching, there's many questions and many comments. So Madeline, please.
Okay, I'll be brief. Looking at this slide, I tend to be a visual thinker, so I'm going to depart from Pin's model of time and think of it in terms of, first of all, I think of it in terms of light. So say that circle on the far left is white light, and then we just think about optics, and it gets progressively broken down in a series of prisms into different colors until we have all the different colors on the right, yet at the same time, all of those different colors make up the light that's on the far left. So that's one type of color mixing to think about. The other type of color mixing would be if you took every single paint that you have in a paint set, watercolor or oil paint, and mixed it all together, you would get this big mass of extremely dark, not quite black, but we'll call it black for the moment. Something extremely dark, murky, unknown color. Then if you were proceeding from left to right here, you would be successively separating out what the original different pigments were, so that by the time you got to the far right-hand side, you would have all those pigments separated out again. Oh, so it's kind of like the David Bohm cylinder in wholeness and the implicate order with the red and the blue drops in it, if anyone knows that.
All right, thank you, Madeline. Well, I think your comment is, if you look at it, I just try to become a visual interpreter like you, and look like it's talking about Genesis, right? When the God separate the light, right? Created let's have the light. Okay, fiat lux, right? So we have the light. We separated the light and put the earth. So it's a Chinese way of Genesis. That's another way to look at. So let's move on. We have 25 minutes left, so I'm not going to rush, but I think that's, see how far we can go about this one. So from now on, we are not going to talk about Book of Change. So we're going to forbid the subject of Book of Change. So we're going to talk about another book called The Doctrine of Mean. Okay, so we'll probably not be able to finish this part, but again, that's fine. I think so. I will make it another session, and we can have more detailed reading because there's a lot of material here. Okay, so traditionally we have in Confucius have 5 classics. Okay, so or sometimes called 6 classics because one has lost, the book of music. So 5 classics, so-called the book of poetry. Book of poetry is like a psalm, if you consider in Bible. Okay, you can call it a psalm. Okay, and the book of document, which is talking about the record of 诗书. Okay, talk about ritual. I think they talk about the government issue, government edict.
Decrees. Yeah.
Decrees, yeah, that's correct, of decrees, yeah. And the book of change, we dealt with that before. Okay, we're not going to discuss anymore for today. And the book of rites talk about the ritual. And then 2 important chapters have been picked up is the Great Learning. I think we read it word by word at the beginning of this year. And today we are going to deal with another chapter, so-called the Doctrine of Mean. And another chapter is the Great Unity. I think Pin talked about this last year. That's because this book is important. And then Book of Music has been lost. And then another thing called the Spring and the Autumn Annals, which is the historical record written by Confucius himself. Okay, so that's why the period time of Confucius we call the Spring and the Autumn. So later in the Song dynasty, Zhu Xi, okay, the Confucius scholar, they pick up 4 books as the standard text for the Confucius and become the national test, the standard test. So all the text is not the contents, that is not all included in these 4 books, which is Analects, is the Confucius teaching, Mencius, so-called Mengzi, and the Great Learning, then Doctrine of Mean. So I think we all, if you have been in this one since last year, we probably go through all of this one. And then beginning of this year, we read the Great Learning, which is, okay, in this book, Analects is very short. It only have 19 books. Total is about 10,000 words. The Great Learning is also very short. I think total probably 1,000 or 2,000 words. And the Doctrine of Mean also very short, about 5,000 words, I think, and only mentions a little bit longer. So that's we are doing. And then with the 52 living ideas, I think since May, we are going to read the the Analects. And then for those who has been in the Dao De Jing reading, and from May, we will start to read Analects. Probably line by line, okay, and that's another chance to join another meetup, so weekly. So today we deal with the Doctrine of Mean. Let's start to read on the very beginning line. We probably can only read a few lines, and then probably I will make another section just specifically read the Doctrine of Mean. I think that's also important. Okay, so the very first line of the Doctrine of the Mean, okay, they deal with 3 things: the nature, the Tao, and the education. Okay, education, I put a question mark. I think Feng Youlan translate is culture, okay, which I may not agree, and we can discuss on that. So the big opening on the Doctrine of Mean, it says, the mandate of heaven is called nature. Okay, nature means the nature of man and the things. Okay, the following of this nature is called Tao. The cultivation of the Tao is called education. The Tao is that which no man for a moment can do without. What a man can do without is not the Tao. So here you talk about doctrine of mean. Okay. In Chinese called Zhong Yong. Okay, that's so here you talk about the mandate of heaven, Tian Ming. Okay, and the second thing talk about the nature, the human nature or things nature. Okay, I think here the idea is the nature of the heaven and the nature of human nature of things. They are, in a way, they are similar. They are homogeneous. They follow the same rule. Okay, so 天命之谓性 here he talk about the mandate of heaven is the nature, and if you follow in this nature, you means you are the Tao. But let's stop here. To this point, both Taoism and the Confucianist are in the same page. They all agree, okay? The human nature is following the mandate of heaven. Find this is the same nature. But Taoism teaching will say, yeah, that's good. Let's keep this way. But Confucius or Confucianist talking about you need to cultivate this Tao, and which is called Jiao, is education. I think in Feng Youlan translate as, it call it culture, I believe. Education. Yeah, Feng Youlan call it culture. But this word Jiao, I think, in my opinion, I think that means education, because that's Confucius' word, you know, because you need to learn, you need to study, and then it's not like by nature it's like this. And the last sentence talk about the Tao. No man can live for a moment without Tao, because here we talk about Tao is not like it's a special thing. Like, okay, let's spend 25 minutes practice Tao. No, he's talking about Tao is on your daily life, when you eat, when you go to school, when you work, and everything is with Tao. If you talk about something special, it's not Tao. I think that's here is talking about. That's why Zhong Yong, the word Yong means common, and then it's all the time. That's what that means. So is anyone have a question or have a better idea to translate or translate this word about Jiao, or have a different idea about here, the idea of the three things: nature, the Tao, and the education, which I translate. So I'm going to move on to the key teaching on this one, and then I think I'm going to probably will finish the these two important message, and then that probably good enough for today. So mean, okay. So the reading is this. I think that's a very important message in this book. Probably that's the key message here. Let me read the translation. To have no emotion of pleasure, anger, sorrow, or joy welling up. Welling up means expression or eruption. Okay, is the state of mean. To have this emotion welling up, but in due proportion, is the state of harmony. Mean is the great foundation of the world. Harmony is the great Tao of the world. Once mean and harmony are established, heaven and the earth, which means the natural world, maintain their proper position, and all things are nourished. So here, Confucius, okay, the writer, the author is Confucius. Zisi is Confucius' grandson. Okay, so he's writing on this. He talk about the human nature, and the first sentence deals with the human nature, but you have to cultivate your human nature. So you can look at here. He talk about emotion. You have the different kind of emotion, but you have the meaning of zhong, which is mean, right? The mean is you don't welling up, express or erupt out your emotion. I like to use this example. So when somebody insult you, okay, you got angry, okay, but you don't just yell out or fight back immediately, okay. You will, Confucius not say, okay, like Jesus, turn your cheek. It's not this way. You will still get angry, but your anger doesn't erupt. It hold it there, and you call it zhong, which is mean. Okay. When you express it in the proper way, okay, in the right way. They call it harmony. So that's zhong and he. That's two key concepts here. Okay. So he said this mean, which is the zhong, is the great foundation of the world, and the harmony is the great Tao of the world. So that's the zhong and the he, or mean and harmony is teaching here, and I think that's the one of the key message in Doctrine of Means. Pin, you have something to say?
Oh yeah, great explanations. But the first line actually was tweak the translation a little bit. Is
hold on, Pin. You talk about on this page or previous page?
No, on this page.
This page, yeah.
Please, yeah, I would translate it as before the activation of emotions.
You mean before? Right? Zhong means
because wei fa wei means not yet or before, and fa is something activated.
Oh,
so
hold on. You consider fa as activate. I consider fa as expression erupted. So if I'm got
right, well, either way, I think similar, right? Yeah, okay. Something that's become in action, whether it's eruption or action. Yeah, but it's before it is whatever your state is before these things take over. And then the second line, this 终结, I mean, I don't disagree with you, but when I read it, I always thought of it in a more musical sense. 终结 means rhythm, that it's on rhythm.
Okay, so
so it's just another interpretation. I don't know which one is closer to the original. Okay. That's all.
终结, okay, so in other way, if you use your musical term, that means you do it in the right time.
Yeah, you're on beat, not off beat.
Yeah, okay. So I think both your interpretation and my interpretation probably doesn't contradict each other, right? Basically, I'm talking about in the proportion, right? Not too much. Okay, and you are talking about in the right timing, in the
right
dimension, right? So probably we're talking about the same thing, and probably they mean both, right? And
right.
Okay, so one is 中 means the way you deal your own emotion, and then he means the way when you express it, put in action, how to do it. So I think that's the teaching on this side. So I think I'm going to move one more, then I will stop here, and let's discuss metaphysics for a while, and then we can conclude. Okay, so another key message is so-called 成, okay, and enlightenment. So if you read Feng Youlan's writing, Feng Youlan translates 成 as perfection. Okay, when I first look at it, I kind of disagree, but then when I look at it, probably right, and I realize 成, this word usually we translate as true heart, or realness, or sincerity, but I think it also means perfectionism. Okay, so perfecting yourself, do all your effort. I think that means, at least in this text. And the mean, another word, enlightenment, that's easy to understand. That means you got enlightened, you understand, you are clear. So let's read this one, and then I'm going to finish this one. So, so progress from sincerity, Cheng, to enlightenment is the attribute of the nature of man and the things. Progress from enlightenment to sincerity is the attribute of education. Okay, so when there is sincerity, there is enlightenment. When there is enlightenment, there is sincerity. It is only he who has the most sincerity can develop his nature to the utmost. Able to develop his nature to the utmost, he can develop the nature of others to the utmost. Able to develop the nature of others to the utmost, he can develop the nature of things to the utmost. Able to develop the nature of things to the utmost, he can assist the transformation and the nourishment of heaven and the earth. Able to assist the transformation and the nourishment of heaven and earth, he can form a triad or trinity with heaven and the earth. So if you remember in the early this year, we talk about the great learning, you will see the similarity here. Okay, here you talk about from yourself, sincerity. Okay, or you want to perfection, self-perfectionism. So move from your own effort, from your heart, true heartedness to enlightenment. Or you can through education, right? And get enlightened and start to understand and make your heart sincere. Then, that's the nature of human. Okay, so you can see the difference from Taoism here. When Confucius talk about nature, human nature, Confucius is talking about education. You need to cultivate, you need effort on that. And then he start to move on, not only for yourself, you also have to develop for others. You also have to develop to the all things. Then you to the heaven and the earth. Then you become part of this universe. So I think that's the whole idea of Confucius' moral teaching. And here, okay, I think I will stop here. And then because the time is running out, and then the rest part that we will discuss later. Then let's give a few minutes to discuss. And if you have a question, you have a comment, and I see CK and Madeline. CK, please.
Yes, Jason, I would like to sort of ask you about your example of the mean. Right? When somebody gets insulted and he or she is angry, what is the right way to express that anger according to the doctrine of the mean? This is my first question, and if I can have a second question, I'll ask this. Can I have a second question?
Let me answer your question. That will be on my own interpretation. Okay. So let's say somebody insult me, I got angry. Okay, or somebody slapped me. Okay, like someone, Mr. Smith. Okay, so it's not like Jesus teach, turn your cheek, right? That's not the teaching based on this. You don't turn your cheek, but you don't just run away. That's too cowardice. But I think the solution would be, I have anger, but I will hold it to certain point. Okay, that's so-called Zhong doctrine, the mean, right? And when I do something, I probably will say, stop doing this. You are insulting me, or I will call police if you do this. I will sue you, something like this. I have to do it in the right time, according to Pin's interpretation, or I should do it in the right portion, because I should not overreact, which is harmony, right? So the Zhong and the He. That would be my interpretation based on doctrine of the mean. Yeah. And probably other people have a different interpretation. At least that's mine. So
yeah.
You have a second question?
My second question is, it just occurred to me, this is completely out of, not related directly, I was thinking, Confucius and Mencius, these are Latinized versions of Chinese names, probably translated by Father Matteo Ricci and the Jesuits who came to China during the Ming Dynasty and later. But why did they not include Xunzi as Xinxius or Zhuzi as Zhuxi as Zhuxius or something like that? Why is the Latinization only for Confuzi and Mengzi and not the rest of these Confucian scholars?
I don't think that people call him Xun Fuzi or call it Zhu Fuzi, right? And the people call Confuzi and Meng Fuzi. And the Meng Fuzi, they don't call this. They call Confuzi, and that's my idea, because I think the Jesuit missionary, they probably asked people not in the royal court or the educated people, they probably ask the common people, right? Because I believe in the royal court or government, they don't call Confuzi, they call Kongzi. But the regular people, the commoner, will call Confuzi. Fuzi means teacher. So they ask what kind of book, what kind of equivalent of our Bible, Holy Scripture. People may say, oh, that's the Analect, and which is written by Confuzi, and they just translate as Confucius. And later on, the second book, okay, the second important book is from Mencius, Mengzi. They just automatically translate to Meng Fuzi, Mencius. But that's just my theory. But I no historical evidence on that. Yeah. We have a few hands up. Let's go to Madeline and Craig. Madeline, please.
Yes, let's see, Cheng,
Yeah.
Cheng, it sounds very much like Ren in a way. It sounds like Ren.
Ren, okay.
In its description of what it is or what to do. I was wondering if you could talk about the difference or how they're related.
I just have to say they are different, okay? And the Ren is more on the action, okay? They have the Ren is not just in your heart, right? You deal with people with the Ren. If you have the behavior as the Ren, okay? They have the Ren's behavior. They have the Ren way to treat people because they deal with other people. And the Cheng is fully in your heart. I cannot tell, right? I can tell you are Ren people or not Ren people because by your behavior. If you behave like a Junzi, okay, you are Ren. If you like a small man, you have no Ren. But Cheng is deal with your heart. Whether or not you do your best, but from outside, I may not be able to tell. Okay, that's talking about the self cultivation. How much effort you put in? And according to Confucius, you probably have to put all your effort. So that's my interpretation. Yeah, I hope it makes sense. Craig?
I have two quick questions. One is, I'm not that familiar with Chinese, but I've lived in Japan for most of my adult life, and I'm interested in mean. The character from mean in Japanese means middle.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering if that mean it could also be thought, I mean, there's kind of the middle way or balance or something like that. Is that related?
Yeah, it's related, but Confucius in the doctrine of the mean has a different meaning, which is just not middle, probably more like proper, right? More proper than the middle. So if you talk about, I think here is a part I haven't had a chance to talk today, okay, but is in Feng Youlan's writing, talk about the golden portion, right? Golden rule. So, but I think that's Aristotelian. When Aristotelian talk about bravery, courage, he talk about is between the cowardice and the rashness, and then it's the courage, right? So that's in between. If the pride is between humility and vanity, that's pride. And we also can use the word zhong, okay, as mean, but I don't see Confucius' mean is the same as Aristotelian's mean. Aristotelian's mean is golden mean, which means between, and then Confucius' mean means perfection, the best, okay, in this situation. So I think that's a subtle difference. On the surface, you may see the same, but I have to argue. That's myself. I will argue they are different. So thank you for asking this question, because this word zhong has many reasons. It could be in the center. It could be means in between. It could be in the average. It could means like proper. Okay, so in here I will say not only proper, probably the best, the perfect. So thank you.
Between the extremes. Well, so my other quick question was just Shangyi, I think you say, or the heaven, or what somebody might translate as God. Shangyi, you say Shangyi?
上帝,
Yeah, I'm just interested because we, in the West, we have this idea of what heaven is, but I wonder what the concept of heaven is, because I'm guessing it doesn't really have a sort of a spiritual connotation, but I'm very curious about what you think at the people at that time, or at least the philosophers, what their concept of, because there is a kind of a cosmology built into these words here that makes me really curious about what they were thinking. Are there divine forces, or anyway, that's my question.
Yeah, thank you. But this question, I think you have to attend this meetup for many times to get the idea. Because we have been discussed many times. Whenever we discuss, if I don't put a hold on that, we can last for 1 hour at least.
Well, why didn't you tell me this group was going when you started? I only just found you.
Oh yeah, sorry, I haven't told you. Yeah, to keep me. All right, but I think we will continue next week and the next week and the next week. So you still have a chance to pick up. Heaven is not like God, but heaven is more than sky. Okay, let's put it this way. So it's not God, it's not paradise. Okay, and it's not sky, in between. So they have the mandate of a heaven. So it's not pure sky. Okay, so we still cannot find the right word to translate. And
well, I've gotten that concept from modern Japanese people. They have a similar.
If you familiar with the Japanese culture, I will say just take a Japanese meaning of tian.
Yeah, it's not like the Western understanding.
That's right. If you know Japanese, that's probably very close. Okay. We have Alina and Kevin. Alina, please.
All right. So this doctrine of the mean, according to it, so if we have sincerity and enlightenment in proper proportion and connection, so say heart and mind, and it's balanced, then from that we could move and develop ourselves to the utmost, and then develop the nature of saints to the utmost. And from that, so obviously what happens then, the transformation and nourishment of heaven and earth will take place. And then the very final thing that what has to happen is the forming of Triad, Trinity with heaven and earth. So what's that, the Trinity with heaven and earth would mean in this particular way, or how does it look like? And perhaps, Pin knows quite a bit about this topic too. Okay. So whoever could answer me this question, thank you.
Yeah, this one is a very Chinese concept, and I think we will deal with this one on many sections. I think if you talk about, read the Dao De Jing, the Taoist writers also talk about this triad, or talk about Trinity, this kind of thing, right? Because the idea is they have the heaven, they have the earth, they have the people. there's three things. That's the so-called three, the great three. Okay, the three are all in one piece. That's the great harmony we are going to achieve. So, in the simple words, you can affirm. I think the Chinese words is 可以与天地参. Okay, you can interpret as sun as three together, or you will be harmonized. Okay, with heaven and the earth. That's the ultimate goal of ancient Chinese teaching. I think this one is one of the teaching during that time, but during the Song dynasty, which is 12th, 13th century, this idea become very important, because if you think about, you are be the good people, you are not only do it for yourself, you are thinking about the entire world. Okay, not only your country, is entire universe. Very similar to today's concept of environmentalist, right? We live in this world. We deal with, we want to harmonize. We need to make everything sustainable, not for your own self, your family, your country, your race, which is human, also the entire world, heaven and earth. I think that's the concept in the ancient Chinese. Okay. So that's the only thing I can say to this moment. Okay, we have Kevin, CK, and Pin. Then we probably have to close today's setup, and I have the Pin have a final commentary of today's session. Kevin, please.
Thank you. I just posted one as a matter of good question about it. The one thing when we see those tags a little bit, you can copy paste it to Google, even search, for example, then that's on the first one, then the person plus 2. Imagine the 2 person you get along together. That's called then a harmony. Except, what's the difference about the Cheng? Like we translate it to perfect or sincerity, sincerity, and there's the first yeah. Basically your mouth, what are you talking? Plus Cheng, success. If you honest to yourself, yeah, that's a Cheng. And the second one, enlightenment, we call it Mean, right? They sun plus the evening time is Yue, moon. That's called enlightenment. So it's very unique. One word speak long story, but speak the truth. What? Yeah. Thank you. And by the way, I'm going to share another 2 words. Another is Jiu, big education. Also, that Jiu, Zhong Yong, religion, we also with the same that word with root. And another word is Xing. Xing, a heart plus the life. That's the Xing. As Jason translates to the nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. CK, please.
I'd just like to try to attempt to answer, try to answer anyway, Craig's comparison of the Japanese concept of Tian, which he encountered in living in Japan. I think the Japanese are heavily influenced by Confucianism and Neo-Confucianism, and these concepts are interwoven into Japanese society and their usage through borrowings from China during the various dynasties, from the Tang and then later on probably during the Ming dynasty. I think one of the great scholars, Zhu Shunshui, actually went to Japan, the Tokugawa shogunate, and taught there and started the whole branch of Confucianism over there in Tokugawa, Japan. And the samurais were very much very heavily influenced by the philosophy of Wang Yangming, which is Neo-Confucianism, and they interpret it in their own way. It becomes a Yomei Haku in samurai thought. So what I'm trying to say is it's similar. The concept of Tian, they call it Ten, and but they also added some of their own quirks in there because of the lay of the land and the way the samurais interpreted to their own for their own purposes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, CK, and thank you, CK and Craig. I think both of you have a great Japanese background. Okay, so when you join us, it's welcome to bring your thought and how do you think, and I think we can compare, and they are very similar in a way, and then they have a subtle difference. Then that would be bring more dynamic in this meetup. Thank you, both of you. And Pin, you have the final words, and then we have to conclude today, and then next week we could talk about Han Feizi. Okay, Pin, please.
Oh, wow. Thank you. What an honor. So yeah, I loved your answer to Elena about the Trinity. How you talk about this harmony of heaven, earth, and human, and also about environmentalism. Once, just by accident, I was staying at a friend's house, and the friend, she had a book on the coffee table. So at night I couldn't fall asleep. So I picked up the book and started reading. And there was an essay in there written by I think, prominent Native American environmentalist and activist. And the whole essay, the main thing was about how we need to change our thinking, that humans keep taking from the earth and from nature in resources and whatnot, and leaving scars, leaving injuries to Mother Nature. That I remember one thing she wrote in there is that when we develop a project, instead of environmental impact reports, we should have environmental enhancement or nurturing reports. So it's when I read that, it really, immediately I was thinking about this, the Chinese traditional culture concept of the Trinity and harmony. And another quick point is this very last passage we just studied. I think it's a great example of the scholar you mentioned, Hu Shi, had an essay that his thesis was that there was not two separate schools of Confucianism and Taoism. They started as one school. Because, we translate Confucianism, but actually in Chinese, it's called the School of Scholars, Ru Jiao. And I really agree with his theory on that. And I think this passage, you can see there's some fundamental concepts really between Confucius and Laozi that were common, but they branched out into different applications and their own school brands of teaching. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. And the next week we continue, just change gear again. Let's go back to the Han Feizi, the legalism, and we're going to do some reading. One major reading is about the Zhuangzi, okay, who criticize legalism or this kind of school. And another thing we're going to read a complete paper by Han Feizi, and which I consider one of the greatest. And just to answer Daniel's question, they have we can pay close attention on it's Hume, right? Not Daniel. Hume's question about logic. So how does Han Feizi try to convince people? Okay, so
I'm sorry, I have just one last question I want to ask.
Okay, please.
Do you and Pin, in your opinions, that this passage that we just read is really kind of naive and kind of too simplified? Because we just spent an hour and a half on Book of Changes, right? Yeah. Everything changes, right? So how is it? It's kind of, I think Confucius is a, kind of I wouldn't call it a fantasy, but it's kind of like too easy to just lay out these things. It's very difficult and maybe almost impossible to, achieve what we just read. Harmony, forming a triad with heaven and earth. As a human, I don't think I can ever compare myself with heaven and earth, so the triad of earth concept, I think it's a little bit, I'm not sure I can agree with that. And also the whole passage seems to be just like, too easy and simplified. I don't know what you guys think.
Well, that's it's a hard question, but I will say, put this way, I will call Confucius as idealist. And if you compare Xunzi, will be the realist, right? Xunzi will be more on the practical side. And the Confucius or the Mencius is more on the idealistic side. And of course, all the this idea, you can say it's naive. It's not possible to do it. Really depends on how you want to exercise. And then again, some people, non-philosophical group, like the people who will not be here, I believe, because they probably consider all of us are naive because we are talking about something which is not practical at all, and which I think none of us will agree because you were here. The person think we are naive, they are not here. They probably in the world doing something they think that's meaningful. That would be my answer. And then when we study this one, when you look at ancient Greek, how does Plato think about the idea of forms, and how does Heraclitus talk about changes? How does the Anaximander talk about the model of the universe? They all have their naiveness there. So it really depends how we're going to read this kind of naive writing, you know. So that's my opinion. Yeah. Thank you for asking this one.
Thank you.
Well, Alex, I would say I agree with you and also disagree with you. You know, even Confucius students would agree with you, because one story in the Analects is the students that were traveling with Confucius, they came upon this town. It was in the evening, so the city wall was already locked. So they went to the guards, and the guard said, "Who are you?" They said, "We're students traveling with Confucius. We need like to spend the night here." So the guard said, "Oh, Confucius, is that the man who does things even though he knows it can never be done?"
Oh my
So
God.
that's agreeing with you. But on the flip side, as you say, the world changes. The change is infinite. So we can never, we don't know how things will turn out, because Confucius, as far as the goals he set out for himself in his lifetime, he completely failed. He didn't accomplish any of them. And even when he died, he called on his one of his favorite students, Zilu, and he lamented, said that the old saying said that every 500 years there will be a sage, and I really thought I was the one, but it turned out I wasn't. But then again, 2,500 years later, we're having meetup groups in the U.S. talking about this philosophy, and many of there are regimes who try to completely eliminate him, and he's still here. So,
I mean,
you know.
I think it's great what he wrote, like this fantasy, like this, wow, we can achieve, we can, you know, but I actually think that this passage is more meant for emperors, and it's not really meant for like commoners. You understand what I mean? Like, especially when he said triad of heaven and earth, it's like almost referring to the emperor, you know, the king.
Okay, Alex, let's stop here, and then I have to promise. I already this year we are not going to run overtime. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And then let's have the James. Okay, James has been waiting for that, and he.
Yeah, I was just gonna say there is a kind of like a Western equivalent of that philosophy. It's probably in Heidegger, the idea that you perfect your moods, and that because of understanding time, affecting your moods, confronting your own death as the personal issue it is to you, and you become you kind of perfect your attitudes and your capacity for being an individual, being a possibility, of being all your possibilities in the world. So there is a kind of like that, and also there's a poem, I think, the heavens above me, the earth below me, you know, like what can go wrong now? You know, it's in other words, everything is under my control. I'm going to handle it because I'm the one in between.
Yeah, thank you, James. Okay, and CK, that's the really last one. I give you 30 seconds.
Thank you. I want to say that by our standards today, contemporary standards, Confucius was a loser. He was a loser, and but he had the last laugh because you know, in the length of time we are still talking about him. So eventually, he laughed when the fat lady sings. You know, and he's got away with it. You know, he was completely unsuccessful during his lifetime. So his works would have been meaningless, but thancefully it was not. So sometimes by losing, you also win. I guess that's the paradoxical side of it.
I think.
Yeah.
The greatest loser in the world. So it's still great. All right. See you guys. Join us next week. And
Ciao. Thank you so much.
Jason.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Full series on the teaching, but enjoy your life. So see you next time.